This is a baby blue shark caught off the coast of Australia in 2008. As you can see, it has two heads. Unfortunately, it is difficult for such deformities to live robustly in the real world. However, when it comes to Pokemon, it is a different story. This time, we will introduce Pokemon with multiple heads and tell you the reasons for the increase, as far as we can tell. Let's take a look. First, this guy. Exeggutor. As you can see, it has 3 heads. It looks as if there might be 3 more on the backside, but that is not the case. Each of them has a different expression, but that is because each of the 3 heads is thinking about separate things. I wonder whose intentions are reflected when they produce skills. By the way, Exeggutor has Execute before evolution. This one has many heads, or rather many bodies. You may be wondering if one of them is also an Execute or if all of them are Execute together. Actually, Pokédex has an explanation. The heads attract each other and spin around. There must be 6 heads for it to maintain balance. In other words, Execute is only possible when 6 come together. They are psychic types, so they find each other telepathically. By the way, the cracked one here is just looking backward, but its face is still on. And as for the occurrence of this Execute, the heads of the Exeggutor are largely related. At a certain point in time, one of the 3 heads of the Exeggutor falls off. This eventually grows into an Execute. That is why it was necessary to gather 6 of them through telepathy. Incidentally, Alola's Exeggutor is a further growth of this Exeggutor. The diversity of types still leaves room for the imagination, with cold weather specifications, desert specifications, and so on. I would like to see more of them in other regions someday. Next up is this guy. Hydreigon. Its hands become faces. It has 3 heads, including the main body in both hands, and is shaped in a way that chopsticks would never be used. And Hydreigon's head is different situation from that of Exeggutor. The heads on their arms do not have brains. They use all 3 heads to consume and destroy everything. Incidentally, the Japanese text says eat up, so it does not seem to be hands like faces. Each has its own teeth and esophagus, which seems to be connected to the stomach of the body. It has 3 heads, but only 1 will. This type of creature seems to be more capable of fighting because of its ability to unify its will. Incidentally, the reason for this kind of form is pre-evolutionary. Zweilous. This is another Pokemon that actually has more than 1 head, but it differs slightly from Hydreigon. It is said that 2 heads do not get along and compete with each other, so they both try to take the lead. This means that before evolving, the 2 heads are not on good terms with each other, but when they evolve, the will of the heads become one. In other words, the one that lost the battle between the heads took over the will and evolved. This is no surprise, since in reality there are creatures that eat their parents and siblings in order to survive. It is an evolution that shows the harshness of the natural world. This guy is next. Dodrio. As you can see, it has 3 heads. Like Exeggutor, each has its own expression. This is also explained in Pokédex. The 3 heads represent the emotions of joy, sadness, and anger. Personally, I think it would be easier to catch it if you go around the one with sadness and throw the ball at it. And it's not just the head that this Dodrio has 3. It also has 3 hearts and 3 lungs, allowing it to run long distances without running out of breath. It can travel long distances while maintaining a speed of 40 miles per hour. It is the best Pokemon for traveling. And Dodo before evolution also has 2 heads. It is actually faster. They run at 60 miles per hour. In other words, in evolving, they did not make their speed faster, but rather increased their stamina. I am also interested in evolutionary variations in the future, such as speed-specific evolution or flight-specific evolution. They don't seem to be very active in battles, but hopefully they will be strengthened in these ways. Next up is this guy. Weezing. It has 2 heads, with a smaller head attached to the side of the larger head. As shown in the gold version of Pokédex, the relationship between the 2 is actually twins. When one of them expands, the other shrinks, coughing twins, it seems. They keep expanding and contracting to mix the gases in their bodies, so we can imagine that it is stronger than coughing alone. And since they are twins, it is highly likely that they each have a will. However, it is a mystery why it was a single being, but increased to 2 bodies as it evolved, and then became twins. Perhaps there are Weezing individuals in the wild from birth. And in the Galar region, this specification is the same. Although the appearance has changed, both twins are firmly alive and there seems to be no change in the size relationship. But there are some individuals that just don't seem to be. The white version of Pokédex says, though very rare, triplets have been found. I'm very curious. Maybe we'll see triplet coughing in the next one. Next up is this guy. Mawile. 2 heads, one in front and one in the back, the big jaw. But there seems to be no consciousness in this jaw. The sapphire version of Pokédex says, the steel jaws are really horns that have been transformed. However, if you think it is the same as the tusks of a rhinoceros or an elephant, it is wrong. It is indeed a Pokémon, the structure of which is impossible in reality. Pokédex in Ultramoon says, the big jaws on the back of its head can't taste anything, so that's the mouth it uses to eat foods it doesn't like. This means that it is not just for show, but is also equipped to serve as a mouth. It may be a mechanism similar to that of Hydreigon's arms, and when you Mega Evolution, they become even more powerful. Become twin-tailed and have one more head. Though Pokédex does not specifically mention it, it is likely to be able to eat the same food as before its evolution. This bulky head is said to tear off its prey, so it may be a carnivore. When confronting it, be sure to go around its front. Next up is this guy. Girafarig. This black tail is its other head, and has a small brain. It serves as a support to protect the main body. The sapphire version of Pokédex says that the rear head doesn't need to sleep, so it can keep watch over its surroundings 24 hours a day, and the white version too says that it can instinctively fight even while facing backward, which suggests that it is quite useful. However, since the brain is small, it seems difficult for them to think deeply on its own. This is what makes them different from Exeggutor. Incidentally, actual giraffes are also very alert and sleep only about 20 minutes a day. This may be the motif of the Girafarig. And speaking of brains and tails, this guy falls into that category. Wobbuffet. However, it is not clearly stated in Pokédex that it is a different creature, and it is only suggested that it has some kind of hidden secret, so it is still unknown. However, in animated films, it sometimes expresses emotions, and it would be interesting to see a situation where this one is actually the main body. A different type of two-headed than Girafarig is this guy. This is Vanillux. It has 2 heads, or rather 2 bodies. Unlike Girafarig, Vanillux has 2 independent heads. The Sun version of Pokédex says each of its 2 heads has a brain, and when they are in agreement, it attacks its enemies by exhaling a violent blizzard, and is similar to Exeggutor. Some say that the reason for this is that the 2 Vanillish were melting and then stuck together. Perhaps it is better to think of evolution in games and the origins of Pokémon differently. In the game, any Pokémon can evolve into multiple Pokémon after one lights up. There is one more thing that makes Vanillux very different from other multi-headed Pokémon. That is its life force. The Moon version of Pokédex says even if it loses one of its heads, it can live relatively problem-free. Since it was originally created by combining 2 independent Pokémon, it may not be indispensable. It is a Pokémon with a slightly different origin and structure from other Pokémon. Speaking of sticking together, so is this guy. Combee. As you can see, it has 3 heads. As shown in the white version of Pokédex, the trio is together from birth. Gender classification is probably based on these 3 as a whole. And only the female will grow up to be a Vespiquen. The whereabouts of the remaining 2 are unknown, as they are not listed in Vespiquen's Pokédex. It is possible that the more vigorous of the 3 grew to a large size, while the others degenerated. The male Combee, on the other hand, would remain as a Combee for the rest of his life and continue to collect nectar on Vespiquen. It is difficult to say which is more cruel. Since we are talking about a set of 3, let me introduce this guy next. Magneton. This one is exactly what you might think of as just being stuck together. According to Fire Red's Pokédex, a linked cluster formed of several Magnemite. It discharges powerful magnetic waves at high voltage. However, the Sun version of Pokédex suggests that they are not just linked together. It says, when 3 Magnemite link together, their brains also become one. It also says, they do not become 3 times more intelligent, which leads us to imagine that they are thinking as one, rather than simply adding to each other. In the Pokémon Snap, we can see the moment of combining, and it is described that the magnetic field seems to be strongly disturbed at that moment. And then, when it evolves further, it becomes this. Magnezone. This is already completely attached together.
Shield's Pokédex shows that the process of evolution to Magnezone is even more complicated.
A special magnetic field changed the molecular structure of this Pokémon's body. The change in appearance is probably due to this change in molecular structure. The very place called Special Magnetic Field is also provided in the game. Magnezones are also attracted to each other by the magnetic field, so we may see 6 or 9 units connected together in the next game.
Mega Evolution and Gigantamax are also possible Pokémon.
Also, speaking of the first 3 linkages, so is this guy.
Dugtrio.
It says, Dugtrio are actually triplets that emerged from one body. As a result, each triplet thinks exactly like the other 2 triplets. In other words, it seems that the original one split up. Perhaps, when the ground is dug up, the 3 bodies are connected underground.
It seems to have claws since it learned Slash, and it is quite an interesting Pokémon to see the images coming out of the ground.
Speaking of the Magnemite series, I would also like to introduce this guy.
Klink. Many people may think of it as a black-white version of Magnemite. However, Klink also differs from Magnemite in its combination. It is said that the 2 mini-gears that compose this Pokémon are closer than twins.
They mesh well only with each other. The characteristics are plus or minus, so compatibility is probably important. And when they evolve into Klang, one of the gears becomes huge. The giant one's expression is gone, but it seems that its will is still there. At the same time, however, a new problem was discovered.
If the mini-gear it launches at a foe doesn't return, it will die. Too risky.
Also, since the number of parts increases with each evolution, some may wonder if it is conversely weakening. Because of this, Klinklang, the final evolved form, seems to be reflecting on the situation a little. Its new spiked gear isn't a living creature. They have added inorganic material to counteract the problem.
In the spirit of partner relations, I'd like to introduce this guy. Phalanx. Like Execute, this is the largest group of 6. Each of them has its own consciousness. Pokédex also states the 6 of them work together as one Pokémon. It is said that the leader of the team is in command, and the soldiers behind him are in charge. In the game, they move separately, showing that each has a strong consciousness. As there are 6 soldiers in a group, it is a great feat that can only be done with a great deal of teamwork. I wonder what would happen if only one of them got hit. I would appreciate it if you write your predictions in the comments. Conversely, the master-slave relationship is being reversed with this guy. Slowbro.
The individual with the tail is the well-known Shellder. It is famous for evolving by biting the tail of Slowpoke, but this Shellder is also conscious. It is said that an attached Shellder won't let go because of the tasty flavor that oozes out of its tail. Although not particularly useful in battle, the bite has some advantages, such as making them painless and allowing them to walk on 2 legs. Incidentally, the reason why they have become scroll shells is still unknown. It is also important to note that the 2 are not in a coexisting relationship, unlike in previous cases. There is a hint in Slowbro's Pokédex, which is a Mega Evolution. All the energy from Mega Evolution poured into the Shellder on its tail, leaving Slowpoke to be swallowed whole. What a reversal of the master-slave relationship! Is it because Slowpoke is unwilling to do anything in the first place? The day of completely swallowed may be close at hand. Now, looking back at the number of Pokémon heads introduced, the maximum number is 6. This may be the limit of what can be controlled. In the real world, there are patterns of symbiosis such as the anglerfish, in which a male is assimilated by a female, and parasitic symbiosis, but the Pokémon world was indeed rich in variations. We will keep an eye out for more forms to be added in the future. See you next time.